All right, let's get going today. Hope you had a good afternoon. You didn't lose money or stuff like that. No, just you lost money too. You did not lose money. Okay, that's good. So I have two more times with you. I have tonight and then tomorrow. This will be the last time that this one is I think really important. It's not stuff that you're going to get normally. When I address this to most pastors, and leaders, they don't even know about this. So I think what I'm going to try to address tonight is how we got to the moral place that we're at in culture, right? So there's some good philosophical stuff, good background here. But tomorrow I'm going to focus on Jesus and his ethic, and I think you'll enjoy some of the things that we have to say about Jesus, as I'm going to leave you with that. So let's just pray, open up our hearts and minds, and we'll get going. Father, again, we thank you for this opportunity. You are so gracious to us, even in the midst of our difficulties, trials, tribulations. You help buoy us up. You strengthen us. At this moment, we are grateful that we get to take time to learn from one another, to grow in knowledge. May it just not be information, but transformation of our lives. May you grow us today. Will you help me be clear? And we want to leave here tonight kind of full with some good knowledge about who you are, what's happening in society, and how we can make things better. In Jesus' name, by the power of the Spirit, everyone said, Amen. All right. Now, hopefully, who has felt like this through some of our sessions? Yeah, a little bit? Yeah. If I just told you things you already knew, that wouldn't be fun, would it? So I'm not trying to overload you with information. Some of the ideas actually take a long time to understand and get a hold of. I mentioned this verse before. I really enjoy this verse because it's a good reminder to me. In 2 Peter, he says, after talking about growing in virtue, actually, he says, I will always be ready to remind you of these things, even though you already know them. And that's just so interesting. There's a deep psychology here that Peter somehow knows. We can know something, but not remember it. It has to be brought to the forefront of our consciousness. Every parent or mentor knows this. You know, I tell my kids, pick up your towel, put away brush your teeth. And they say, I know, right? But that's just part of life. We need to have reminders, even though we might know something, to bring it to our forefront of our consciousness. He says, even though you've been established in this truth, which is already present to you, I want to remind you of these things. And he says, I consider it right, as long as I am in this earthly dwelling, I love this phrase, to stir you up by way of reminder, right? To be stirred up. And I also want to be diligent, he says, that anytime after my departure, you will be able to call these things to mind. That's part of my heart, is that you would be able, after I'm gone, you guys keep going through various teachers, you're learning so much in that, but some of these things you'll be able to recall to mind. Like when a teacher talks about, we should know these things, you have a little bit deeper sense of what it means to know, right? What is knowledge? Justified true belief, or something close to that, right? So tonight I want to talk about, what? My wife's giving me a signal.
Well, you're right in front of the screen, so that's not better.
Do you want me to go like this? Is that better? But then now I'm in front of these guys. Walk around. I'll move around. How's that? I can do that. All right. So I'm going to talk about the topic of the disappearance of moral knowledge. Notice I didn't say moral belief. I didn't say moral talk, but moral knowledge. And we've already had some discussions on what moral knowledge is. This is not original with me. There's been a number of current thinkers. Dallas Willard, he just passed away a few years back. He's a Christian philosopher, was at the University of Southern California, USC, for many years. Wrote a book called The Disappearance of Moral Knowledge. It's pretty technical. What I'm trying to do is bring it down to a level that we can start to understand what's kind of going on around us in the culture, okay? There's a number of other books, something like The Death of Character. I love Jay Budziszewski's book, What We Can't Not Know. There's certain he argues, there's certain moral principles that we are aware of that we can't fail to know. And our conscience makes us aware of that. Even it says in John 17 that the Holy Spirit, part of the Holy Spirit's job is to what? Convict us, or the world, of sin, of where we're falling short. With this, what I want to do, kind of the big picture, is I want to give you my central claim about this issue. How has morality, or the knowledge of morality, disappeared? What do I mean by that? And then secondly, talk about some characteristics to morality that will help us understand deeper what we're trying to reclaim. And then finally, just give a little bit of application for us here today. So the claim that I'm making is this, and it comes from Willard and a few others, so it's not original with me, is that there is now no recognized systematic body of moral teaching that can be presented as knowledge in our culture anymore by any of our institutions. And chiefly the universities, and only slightly less so by the churches and religious institutions, and certainly not law and government. So what you actually have is, prior, let's say, to the 1960s, there actually was a cultural set, a body of knowledge that people would appeal to in order to know what goodness is, know what the right thing to do is, and then actually help people do the right thing. Okay? You could appeal to something, like, for instance, hold up that book that's right in front of you. Hold it right, no, that one, the big one. What book is that? The Bible. It was actually thought that the Bible housed a body of knowledge that would help you live life well. But then that was rejected. And I'm going to show you how it was in our culture. Let's just look at the law for a second. I'm going to tell you a story. Now, I'm going to give you a warning that if you go look it up on the internet and that, there's some pretty rough stuff that goes along with it. But I'm going to tell you the story because it gets to the point that I'm going to try to make. There was a gentleman in the UK. I'll call him a gentleman now. A person in the UK named Armin Maiwis. And he was, I think, a computer technician scientist. And he was a person living his life in the tech field. And he got part of a certain group of people. And what happened is he got put in this situation where he started posting in a particular chat room in the 2000s. And it was called the Cannibal Cafe. And what he did was, he put out an advertisement for people to come over and volunteer to be eaten. Now you think, that's crazy. And I would say, yeah, that seems pretty wild, huh? Am I just making this up? In fact, I'm not making it up. So he puts out an ad, and someone actually answers the ad. They come over to his house, and then as they hang out, they watch a movie, and then it's time for him to do the deed, which is to kill him and eat him. So he ties him up, and at this point, the guy starts to get a little bit, as probably he should, he gets a little bit, nervous about it, and then he says, I want out. So Armin actually unties him, lets him off the hook, as it were, and then they hang out for a little bit more, and then he leaves. But then he keeps posting, and someone else answers the ad. Another person comes over, they hang out, and it comes time for him to do the deed. And sure enough, he kills him. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do we know that this is accurate? After a little bit, some people found this person was missing. Some people called the police. They kind of found out. They went to Armin's home, and there they found the other person chopped up, all in the refrigerator, and he had eaten some of them, right? Well, how do we know all this? Well, it turns out to be the case that Armin actually recorded the whole thing. So they have it on videotape. So he goes and is arrested. They arraign him. This is in the UK in the early 2000s. And then they take him to court. And guess what? Huh?
He gets off
Yeah, why do you, if you think he gets off, why do you think he gets off?
because it was voluntary.
You're exactly right. They could not convict him at the time because it was consensual. Now, do you think that's wild, isn't it? Just because you consent to something doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't seem like it, right? Yeah, you can consent to something that's wrong. But they couldn't, as a society, convict him of a crime. So they worked at it, which is just mind-blowing when you think about it. But they worked on the case, and they were eventually able to convict him of a crime. And can anyone think about what it might be?
Shoplifting.
Not shoplifting. He didn't do that.
Something to do with the ad?
No, it doesn't have to do with the ad, because that was a sort of a free exchange of information at that point. Yeah.
Is it because he filmed it?
No, it wasn't because he filmed it, though that's, it's kind of like crass. It's a crazy thing, yeah.
Is it just because of cannibalism?
This is very interesting. Here you have Germany, right, and its own history. It didn't actually have a law against cannibalism. So there was no law against cannibalism that they could arraign him on, or convict him on, I should say. Any other idea? Yeah?
Business license?
No. No, it has to do with the actual killing itself. There is a physician-assisted suicide law. Oh, did I miss a hand? Yeah.
Was it the fact that his tools weren't clean?
No. Yeah. No, it was actually because they got him under a physician-assisted suicide law. There's euthanasia, or physician-assisted euthanasia is against the law in Germany. So because the person asked him or consented to kill him, he was convicted on the fact, like a doctor, he couldn't put another person to death. So they get to put him in jail. They give him, how many years do you think they give him in jail?
Oh, no.
They gave him 8 years for killing a. Now you just think, how in the world can this be, right? And Germany's pretty sensitive to these things. They eventually went back to trial to get him further sentenced, and they did. They got him for a life in prison. They don't have the death penalty in Germany. Eventually, Armin, as it goes, while he's in jail, you can read about the story. He becomes a vegan and starts advocating against factory farming and things like this. So an interesting turn of events. Now, I would want to ask, how is it that a person can get to that point? Right? What is it in my interest as a moral philosopher and even as a pastor, how can a person get to that point where they're so insensitive to their moral conscience? Right? And then how can the law and our public morality be in such a place that we can't even, or we have a difficulty even convicting this person of a moral crime? That's pretty wild, right? Did you have a thought, Cooper?
No, it's
Okay. Yeah. So, what about over in our country? Back in 1992, another abortion case, we talked about abortion earlier, right? Another abortion case came up into the Supreme Court. This was called the Casey decision. And essentially what the Casey decision did was extend the right to abortion through all 9 months. And this is also what the Dobbs case overturned, right? So, but I want you to look at the wording of what the justices, the ones who were for it in this particular case, for Planned Parenthood, what they said about individuals, human individuals in our country, right? Now listen to look at these words. They say at the heart of liberty, and we're for liberty, is the right to define one's own existence, concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of life. It's very philosophical, actually. Beliefs about these matters could not define the attributes of personhood were they formed under the compulsion of the state. So in other words, and numerous lawyers have since commented on this, is that you are the sole arbiter of your existence. Meaning you get to define everything about who you are, right? Now that's an interesting philosophical concept, but to put that into law really affects how people view themselves in the culture, right? So now you have, and I'm not going to get into this controversial topic, but now you have people who are physically male, right, and they identify as something completely different, right? And you guys are aware of this. And so that type of concept is then supported in the actual laws that we have. And so you wonder why, how did we get to this point? And part of it you see in the law itself. What about the university? What's interesting is that the universities used to be part, along with high schools and other places, part of helping people develop themselves morally. And there used to be 3 important questions that were raised in university training, but you really don't get it anymore. Here are those 3 great questions. In fact, these are the 3 questions that are brought up in the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus himself. Okay? And they've been a part of the history of Western culture and Western morality for centuries, right? One of the key questions is, who is well off, or what is the good life? Okay. Now, Jesus raises this. Who is blessed, right? That's part of the opening of the Sermon on the Mount. The person who is blessed is the person who has come in contact with the kingdom of God, Jesus talks about, and all the riches that are a part of it. Now what has happened in our culture is everyone gets to define their own version of the good life, okay? So let's just take this for example. If I give you this exercise, what do these 2 things share in common? Yeah, they're both green. Yeah.
I was thinking football.
You were thinking, yeah, no, I totally get where you're going. That's totally right. So we have a green field and a green helmet. What do they share in common? The property of being colored or being green, right? Very simple, straightforward, nothing weird there. Where do you see blue? Oh, you see like right in here. I'm just focusing on the green right now and in the sentence. Now if I do this, same type of syntactical structure in the sentence. What do a good hammer and a good movie share in common? They're both good, but what do we mean by good?
One's useful and one we enjoyed watching.
Right, by good here you might say, well, I enjoy the movie. Here you might say, well, it fulfilled, I think you both said it. Yeah, go ahead.
They accomplish their purpose.
Yeah. That's not your answer that you just gave, which I'm very impressed, is the historical answer, going all the way back to Aristotle. And certainly Jesus puts it in the Sermon on the Mount. If I put up here, if I say I'm living the good life, what do you think people think I'm living? If I go, I'm living the good life, what does that mean? Money, power. What would you say, Katie? Money, cars, or everything. But if I said this, I'm living a good life, then what do you think?
Satisfied.
Maybe satisfied. What'd you say? Content. Humble, right? Sounds a little bit more of a moral quality, right? But we're using good. Good is in both of those sentences, right? So if you guys are right, if we define by good is what A good thing is what accomplished its purpose, right? What happened in our culture is that you are no longer, there's no longer an objective sense of purpose in our culture. Everyone gets to define the good life as they want it. Whereas before, there was a vision of the good life. You see that in the Sermon on the Mount. And then what you tried to do is emulate that good life. I'm living a good life that reflects the good life. Does that make sense to you? There we're using good in the sense of it accomplished its purpose. So a good movie, if it's a comedy, will make you laugh. A good drama will make you think, have certain kinds of feelings in that, right? We've lost that idea in our particular culture. And we've lost the idea of how to form good persons, right? The other two most important questions, I would say, is who is a good person? So who do you think people would point to as a good person today? Oprah. Oprah? Yeah. There's a great book called The Gospel According to Oprah. It's actually it's a very serious book, and it really outlines her understanding of the gospel. It's Oprah's gospel. It's very, very interesting. Yeah, why would they say Oprah's a good person? Huh?
Because you get a car.
You get a car, right? She gives you stuff, right? Yeah. Who else?
I think Robin Williams was.
Robin Williams? Yeah. Why would you say what?
Made everyone smile.
He made people smile, right? Is that a good thing? Yeah, I think it is. Who else? Yeah.
Dr. Phil.
Yeah. Okay. Talk about why.
I don't know, he just like helped everyone solve their own problems.
Yeah. So someone who helps other people, who are unselfish, sacrificial, those are good persons, right? And so if we could, we would sort of outline what a vision of what a good person is, right? Now here's the key. What people no longer really strive after, or there's no body of knowledge in our culture anymore, is how do you become a good person? Movies, even commercials, actually are fairly good at sort of trying to give us a vision of what the good person is. But how do you become a good person? That's an entirely different thing. How do you make good persons? What are the pathways to doing that? Right? That's when I say we've lost a body of knowledge or of moral knowledge, that has actually disappeared in our culture. Go up to a parent and tell them they're not parenting well. They'll flip. You just don't do that, right? Because there's no recognized body of knowledge anymore for us to appeal to. These are, I think, the most important questions for us to ask. Who is well? What is the good life? Do we have an objective sense of what that is? What is a good person? Was Mother Teresa living the good life? In the biblical sense, yes. Right? She was living the good life. She was an example of a good person living the good life. That may not include money and cars. Not that there's anything directly wrong with those. But she was living the good life. She was living it from the kingdom of God. And how do you become a good person? That's a really, really interesting question. How do we form good persons? There is no recognized way to do that anymore in our culture. Michael Sandel is over at Harvard University. He's a rock star when it comes to moral philosophy. I mean, he teaches hundreds of students going through Harvard, one of the top Ivy League schools. He makes this point. Don't worry about the names here that he's referring to, but he makes the point that for modern moral philosophers, the principles of justice that define our rights, they don't think it should rest on any particular conception of virtue. What he means by that is there's no understood way to live. Rather, instead, a society must respect each person's freedom to what? Choose his or her own conception of the good life. So you have, over the last couple of hundred years, many moral philosophers and universities teaching that we can't tell you what the good life is, you have to choose it, right? You make that, you create that for yourself. And that's a very, very different posture. Going back a little bit further, this is the president of Harvard a few years back in the 80s. He said this, notice his words. Religious institutions no longer seem to be able, as they once were, to impart basic values to the young. That's an interesting evaluation. He says, in these circumstances, universities need to think hard about what they can do in the face of what many perceive as a widespread decline in ethical standards. So what has happened is there became a vacuum of no body of moral knowledge that everyone could appeal to, which included the Bible, actually. The president of Harvard, you could see them give essentially sermons. Yeah.
So is he crediting the decline of ethical standards to religious institutions?
Yes. So there was a move to basically discredit first the Bible, and then a move to discredit the church as an institution and a body of moral knowledge that no longer works. So we need to now take over that task. And actually, that's what universities have now done. They have tried to fill that vacuum and now are trying to form people in a very particular direction about how to live what they perceive as the good life. And this is you're seeing it more and more now. They're more upfront about it. I'm going to skip this. Let's go back just a little bit more. This is going back to the 60s. A lot of times you'll hear Martin Luther King referred to as Dr. Martin Luther King, but he was first a reverend. Does anyone know what he got his doctorate in? Theology. He did his dissertation on issues on the concept of God in that. So that's actually what his doctoral ministry is. He says this in the 60s, right? So this is not new, right? He said it is midnight in the parable. He was referring to a parable of in Luke 11. It's also midnight in our world, and the darkness is so deep that we can hardly see which way to turn. It is also midnight within the moral order, he says. At midnight, colors lose their distinctiveness and become a sullen shade of gray. Moral principles have lost their distinctiveness. For modern man, absolute right and wrong are a matter of what the majority is doing. He says right and wrong are relative to likes and dislikes and customs of a particular community. We have unconsciously applied Einstein's theory of relativity, which properly describes the physical universe, to the moral and ethical realm. So here he is, he's fighting for civil rights based off of the image of God in human beings, but that has slowly become eroded, and he's finding this difficulty in finding a common moral ground to make his case. And this is going all the way back to the 60s. I'm going to skip this part here. When I ask students in my applied ethics classes, what are you concerned with? Like, let's say I have a kind of like this size group or so, 15 to 20 students. I ask them what they're concerned with in class, and so I'll get a list. And the problem is that I can't even fit the list on the screen. They're concerned with so many different moral issues, right? And they don't know how to navigate it. I mean, and that, I think it's really, really difficult these days because all these issues are being presented to us, and it's really hard for one person to work through all these different issues. Going back to the prophet Hosea, he said this, my people, God, coming from God, my people are destroyed for a lack of what? Knowledge. And he implies here moral knowledge, right? Because they reject knowledge. And that's essentially what has happened in our culture. There's been certain aspects of morality that have been rejected, particularly from the Bible and also coming from the church. So knowledge can actually disappear in a culture. It can be rejected, it can be ignored, it can actually be forgotten.
Yeah, like when I found the
Yep.
For however many years?
For how many years? It can disappear, and that's exactly what he was referring to. So we have a paradox in our culture. How can you say that moral knowledge has disappeared while at the same time all we hear is moral talk all over our culture, right? That seems odd, because we talk about morality all the time. We hear it. But at the same time, there's no way to appeal or to justify it. Take TV shows like The Good Place. Has anyone watched The Good Place? Yeah. You guys like it? There's some very interesting stuff. In fact, one of the main characters is a moral philosopher, right? A show about kind of like heaven and hell, and it wrestles with all these moral issues. You see signs. I took a picture of this sign in Newport Beach. Notice it says, "In this house we believe." I wanted to wait outside the house and talk to the person. What if it said, "In this house we know"? That'd be a different twist on it, right? But I would love to just you could sit down and talk to a person about what they mean by these various things. You see this on shirts, bumper stickers, a whole host of things, very common today. You think about the shirts people wear. They talk about morality, but yet at the same time there can be contradictory. Peace is power, yet at the same time reparations are due. No justice, no peace. So we have very conflicting messages. We saw this one earlier about abortion. I do my Chipotle order, and I can't get away from environmental ethics, right? They tell me about my food print in the world. So ethics or morality is ubiquitous in our culture, yet there's no way to unify our moral life. Chad Bogosian puts it this way. He says, "Have you ever wondered how your friends simultaneously deny moral facts, yet they accept the universal wrongness of things like bullying, sexual assault, and greed?" We hold these paradoxical views. Okay. C.S. Lewis said this. He said, "A lot of people think God is the sort of person who is always snooping around to see if anyone is enjoying themselves, and then he tries to stop it." Right? Well, that's not really the case. God really wants people to flourish, right? And Lewis, you guys just read Mere Christianity, right? Is it? Partially. Okay. Lewis has a great illustration about how to navigate morality, or what morality is about, and how to unify it. He says basically there are 3 parts of morality, okay? And this is a great analogy to keep in your mind. He says morality is like a fleet of ships, right? If you think about a fleet of ships, what must a fleet be like in order for it to function well? And he says you need 3 things. Each individual ship has to be what? Seaworthy, right? It has to be able to sail the seas. You got to make sure the hull is good, no holes, no leaks, right? But then he says the fleet also needs to know how not to collide into one another, how not to bump into one another. And he says finally, the fleet needs to know its destination and purpose, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, well, you might have a seaworthy ship, and you may not collide with one another, but you really don't know what your destination is, right? He says this is a perfect image of what morality is like. And so when he talks about a fleet of ships, I kind of think of this, a Navy ship, right? A Navy fleet. They are seaworthy. They know how not to collide into one another. They have a particular mission, a destination, a purpose, right? But when I get into real life, it looks more like this. This is an actual sailing regatta off the Spanish coast. It just looks completely chaotic, right? And people going every which way, barely almost bumping into one. This is what real life feels like. But Lewis says when you think about the moral life, you should think about it this way. Take into consideration these 3 things. And this is a good way to think about moral issues. He says, when you encounter a moral issue, think about how it affects your personal character, right? You want to be able to cultivate virtues in your life, right? You want to be seaworthy. Have the kind of character that can back up what you say. Then he says, we need a system of justice in the whole society so that we can have fair play and harmony between individuals. This is what sort of has broken down in our culture. He says, and finally, you need meaning and purpose. That is, what is humanity's goal? But in our culture, everyone gets to define that for themselves. So we don't have a common purpose, a common end, a common goal. And Lewis thinks that this is one of the main things that has been lost or disappeared in modern culture, is we have no unifying meaning and purpose to go after in life. There is some personal character. We have a system of justice, though that's breaking down. But we don't have a goal for this. He said, for the Christian life, God, through the Holy Spirit, helps us develop in the midst of community our own personal character and virtues. We have a system of justice, and our goal is to glorify God and enjoy his creation forever, as the Westminster Catechism says. Let me go here. One thing that is interesting is that little kids have no problem understanding morality. Right? If you ever are around little kids, someone takes a toy, they know very quickly, hey, that's not fair. Right? So morality actually is very knowable. I think God has actually built it into our systems. What happens, we can become obsessed with it, or sometimes we suppress it actually in our lives. And I think we actually come equipped knowing a number of things about morality. But people have become very skeptical today about morality. We learned earlier, here you have a scientist, Michael Roos, who says, look, there is morality. Rape of a child is wholly wrong. But then in another statement, he says in the newspaper, morality is flim-flam. Morality is just a bunch of emotions, like liking ice cream and sex and hating toothaches and marking up student papers. So he talks out of both sides of his mouth, right? Morality is, some things are wrong, but at the same time he says it's flim-flam. That is just wild. So religion in the church has generally been discredited, especially if you look at the universities, when it comes to understanding moral reality or becoming a good person. Also, science has tried to describe morality, but what has happened, you guys don't read the literature probably, I'm in the field. What has happened is that in science has tried to give a foundation for morality, and what they have found is that they can't do it. So actually what has happened is numerous scientists actually say that there is no such thing as morality, it's an illusion. Let me give an example. Some of you may have read it before from Dawkins. He says that in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Look at his language. Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it, nor any justice. The universe as we observe it has precisely the properties we would expect at bottom if it has no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Right? He's saying there's no such thing as morality. And these are major leaders in the culture. He's from the UK, of course. Right? What's even more wild to me is I teach a lot of teachers. Justin McBriar wrote an article for the New York Times, Why Our Children No Longer Know Moral Facts. Here's what's happening in elementary all the way up through high schools, at least for us in the States. Now, has anyone ever, does anyone remember Arthur, the cartoon Arthur? Yeah, Arthur, and he had a friend named, is it Binky? Right, yeah. So you used to be able to find this, they've taken it down, but Binky had a game called Binky's Facts and Opinions. And it's for elementary school kids, and it's supposed to teach the kids the difference between facts and opinions, okay? And so he says, if I say Pal has 4 legs, that's a what?
Fact.
That's a fact, right? It's a fact, but notice the reason. Because I can show somebody else why it's true. No matter who says it, it's true. Pal has 4 legs. Right? So you go on with the game. Right? But if I say Pal is the best pet, well, that's a what? An opinion. Right? It's an opinion because I can't show somebody else that it's true. Somebody else might think that Nemo is the best pet. We would have a difference of opinion. All right? So you would go through these and you would start to sort the facts from opinions. Right? Here's an example. He is standing. Fact or an opinion? Fact, right? So you would hit fact and it would go, yay! If you get 3 of them right, you get to watch a little video. Right? You're like, yeah, I get to watch the video. Here's another example. He is a boy. So 8, 10 years ago when I used to do this, everyone would answer, fact. Today, I put this slide up, everyone in the classroom goes, or they start to laugh, or they get real uncomfortable and they move, right? They took down the game. You can find screenshots of it, but you can't find the game anymore because that's controversial, right? In the Common Core, this is what the federal government and that recommends for teachers to teach in various classrooms. I'm going to give you an example of something here. So in the Common Core, they help elementary and middle and high school students. This is what they use to sort facts from opinions. Right? Now, real quick, I want you to do an exercise with me. Write down these 2 definitions so you can remember it. A fact is something that is true about a subject and can be tested or proven. These are the definitions that they give the students. An opinion is what someone thinks, feels, or believes. Right? So a fact is something that is true about a subject and can be tested and proven. You saw that back in Binky's little game, right? You could show the other person that, right? You could prove it in that way. Opinion, what someone thinks, yes?
So how do we show people are, like, religion isn't just an opinion?
Yeah, that's exactly the next step we'll get to, Trent. It's a great question. Everyone good? No. No? Okay. I appreciate the honest answer. So using these definitions, now what you're going to do as students, if you were a student in the class, you would sort facts from opinions, all right? So I'm going to give you about 7 statements, and I just want you just give your gut reaction, don't worry, all right, okay? Using these definitions, you sort whether it's a fact or an opinion. Ready? Number 1, copying homework assignments is wrong, fact or opinion? Opinion? Okay. Oh, we have a little bit of a disagreement. Right? Okay. Who says fact? Opinion. Okay, so almost split. Right. Number 2. Cursing in school is inappropriate behavior.
Opinion.
Fact? All right. Opinion. Again, okay, fair enough. All men and women are created equal. Fact? Opinion. Okay. Couple. It is worth sacrificing some personal liberties to protect our country from terrorism. Fact? Wait, let's see. It's having fun. Opinion? Few opinions. It is wrong for people in the U.S. under the age of 21 to drink alcohol. Fact? Let's see. Opinion. Interesting. All right. 2 more. Vegetarians are healthier people than those who eat meat. Fact? Nobody. Opinion? Just everybody. Interesting. Drug dealers belong in prison. Okay, fact? Couple of us. Opinion? Almost all of us. All right. Those of you who said this is an opinion, why?
I don't know if it's a law or not. So
Yeah, it is a law. Yeah, go ahead.
It depends on how you're coming off with that statement. 'Cause that could be a statement or like an actual law.
Is it a?
If it's a statement, people in Peru, they can drink and be safe.
But it says in the U.S. It's not saying in Peru.
But no, I'm saying like it depends on how it's described.
Well, can you show? I mean, according to the definitions, can you show that that?
Actually, I think that might be an opinion because it's using the word wrong instead of illegal.
Okay, please listen to what you just said. Say it one more time.
I think it actually is an opinion because it's using the word wrong instead of illegal.
And why would saying that it's wrong make it an opinion?
Because someone might think it's right.
Right. So notice that if you claim that something is wrong, it's a what? It's an opinion. It's not knowledge. So the things that maybe you might have been checking out a little bit that I was talking about that were kind of heady about the law, when you get down to the basic level teaching elementary school kids, if you say something wrong, is wrong, it's an opinion. But isn't that a fact? I mean, the laws are on the books in all 50 states.
in the U.S. it is.
Yeah.
Well, can't wrong also be a fact? Like 2 plus 2 equals 5 is wrong. And that's a fact, not an opinion.
Right. It wouldn't be like the point that she is making, it's not a moral fact. That would be a mathematical fact.
Okay.
Right? Okay. What about copying homework assignments is wrong? Fact or opinion? Why opinion?
I said yes. I have a Bible and
Huh?
It's the same question.
It is. It is.
Copy homework in a heartbeat. It's still against a
It's still against their rule. You know, it's funny. I'll have students, and like 90% of them will say, "No, that's not. It's not wrong." Or I'll put up here, "Cheating on assignments is wrong." Is that a fact or an opinion? They say it's an opinion, and I'm like, "I'm going to be watching you. I'm going to be watching you." Right? What about number 3? Why fact, not an opinion? Because you can prove it? How so? Huh?
You can use scripture to prove it, and
Okay.
you can just you would have to find out how they're not equal.
Yeah. What's the justification here? What makes them equal?
The Bible.
Well,
God says.
the person that created them said
Okay.
they were equal, so
Right.
they're equal.
Yeah. Comment.
But they're not even physical.
Right. That's true. Or in talent. Or in smarts.
Women are way smarter.
Go to my wife.
That is an opinion.
And it's right.
So, for sake of time, I'd love to draw it out longer. The Common Core says this, that every single one of these are opinions. Okay. So notice what has happened. Anything that refers to values, morals, or even beauty, these are all opinion claims and not factual claims. But friends, are not human beings created in the image of God equal? And that's not an opinion, it would be a fact. But as someone said, I forget who it was in the back, says, well, you can't use the Bible. That's right. In our culture, if you do that, that's a rejected source of knowledge. It's just an opinion, right? That's just your opinion.
In my college English class.
Yeah. But this is deeply mistaken, right? I mean, think about it. If you're going to pull out number 3, that's the foundation to rights. Not just human rights in the United States, but actually international human rights. And if you move that into the opinion realm, that's a big problem. So there really is a loss of moral knowledge for our children because the teachers are actually teaching them that. They're being taught that there is no such thing as objective, knowable morality, right? Here would be my response, right? Statements can be true even if one cannot prove them. We talked about that earlier, if you recall, right? I can make the claim there is no life on other planets. I can't prove that right now, but from a God's eye perspective, that's either true or false, right? I don't think there are actually, Hugh talks about this, so does Jeff, but I don't think is at least intelligent life on other planets, but even if I can prove it, that claim is either true or false, right? It doesn't matter. Opinions also can be facts. The definitions they give are mistaken. So if I say my opinion is, or I believe that George Washington was the first president of the United States, that's my opinion, but guess what? It's also what? A fact. So they've actually led the students wrong in giving the definitions. The definitions are mistaken in this case. Value claims and moral claims can be facts, and we can know them, right? Torturing people for fun on Sundays is wrong. Would you agree? Well, we'll just stick to Sundays for right now. Is that a fact or an opinion? It's a fact, right? Huh? It's okay on Monday. Now, of course, I put that there as a little bit of a joke, but it's wrong on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays too. Right? Yeah.
Something be a fact and an opinion at the same time.
That's what I just said. Yeah. Something can be a fact and an opinion at the same time. So all I have to do actually, like on a statement, I believe George Washington was the first president of the United States, someone says, well, that's just your opinion. Just remove the I believe part. And just put George Washington was the first president of the United States. It's either true or false, right? Torturing people for fun is wrong. You don't have to put I believe to it. A lot of times what happens today, because of this bifurcation, is you're forced to say, I believe thus and so. Rather, we can just say, torturing people for fun is wrong. And, I know it's wrong. Don't you know it's wrong? Right? Trent, you were asking the question about religious claims, right?
Yeah.
So what happens also is religious claims are put into the column of opinion and not fact, right? And we have to be able to show that there is such a thing as religious knowledge. There's religious facts and not just opinions in these cases. It's interesting, if I had time, how do you know that torturing people for fun is wrong? Yeah, you can get it from an authority. Why does the Bible think that torturing people for fun is wrong?
We're created in God's image.
Yeah, that could be part of it, is that something that valuable, but what is torturing? Inflicting pain on someone else. Now, seriously, hear this. How do you know that is the case? Have you tortured a few people to figure it out? No, absolutely not. When it says you have to be able to prove it, do you go out, torture a few people, and go, see, it's wrong? No, that's not how you do it. Actually, the way you do it is you introspect. You know what it's like to feel pain, and you're like, you can imagine with your moral imagination, if someone's inflicting pain on me, and they're doing it for fun, that's profoundly wrong, right? Yet, people are being taught in schools, in universities, that's actually a matter of opinion. It's pretty wild. And that's sort of what brings us to this point. Let me close with this quote, and then I just want to give you two applications. In The Death of the Character, James Davison Hunter, he's a Christian sociologist. Listen to what he says about our situation. It's really interesting. He says, as it is currently institutionalized, moral education does just the opposite of what it intends. In its present forms, it undermines the capacity to form the convictions upon which character must be based if it is to exist at all, right? In other words, even the schools are teaching morality is just a matter of opinion. It has nothing to do with fact on what it means to be a good person. He says, but in the society, we say we want character. We don't want our CEOs to cheat us out of money. We want banks to be responsible, etc., right? But we really don't know what we're asking for, he says. He says to have a renewal of character is to have a renewal of a creedal order that constrains and even limits us, obligates us, even compels us. The price is too high for us in society to pay. He goes on, he says, we want character, and this is so powerful. We want character, but without unyielding conviction. We want strong morality, but without the emotional burden of guilt or shame. We want virtue in our society, but without particular moral justifications that invariably offend other people. We want good without having to name what is evil. We want decency without the authority to insist upon it. We want more community without any limitations to personal freedom. Yeah. Here he concludes with this. In short, we want what we cannot possibly have on the terms that we want it. So you have a culture that says morality, value, it's opinion. But God, do we want it? We want it in our CEOs, we want it in our coworkers, we want it in our friends, we want it in our community, we want it in our family. And it's going to be, I think, the Christian community that is now going to have to show the way in a society that no longer knows the right hand from the left hand. Let me offer you a suggestion. When you get into moral conversations, I love this phrase, not original with me. People always jump into arguments and they to agree with them. First, seek clarity before you seek agreement. One of the things that I have found is most people aren't clear about what they're thinking about. And if we ask good questions, are good question askers, people love to talk, especially about themselves. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Why do you think abortion is okay? You know, what is the unborn? There's lots of good questions you can ask. And a lot of times, there's issues that people just aren't clear over. Also, I think Christians need to be what I would call courageously humble about the moral knowledge we possess. Right? It's very, very controversial. Even in my context, to say something like marriage should be between one man and one woman, right? It can be. You can lose your job in some context. Yet I think we need to be courageous but humble in saying that no, we know some things wrong, right? And I think they're facts too. We know moral facts, and not be embarrassed that they come from the Bible. From our religious tradition, and that, yeah.
Is Azusa Pacific still like a Christian
college? Mm-hmm. It's considered an evangelical Christian college.
Are you still able to, like you just said, speak like that in the class?
Yes, I do, and I try to take my own advice, but it's incredibly more difficult because I have students coming in who identify with various sexual identities. And if I ask them questions about it, their initial thought, the way they're trained outside of that, like from high school, is that if you question anything about me, then you're being immoral, essentially, right? And so we're supposed to lead discussions, but not guide in a moral vision. That's the pressure that is on these days. I have a number of friends that teach in a secular context, and it's very much the case there, right? I'm still able to do it, but it's a very precarious situation in this case. Just let me know, what's the one thing that stood out to you? A few of us. Anything that stood out during this? Any takeaways that you would have? Anything that impacted you? Yeah, Trent.
Some of the wrong statements you said are opinions, and growing up, they felt like facts to me.
Like what?
When you said like, oh, it's like wrong to rob a bank or something.
Hmm.
Like the ones you put up on the screen.
Oh yeah. That actually comes from the Common Core, right? I think actually all of those can be established as moral facts. Actually, what we have lost is how to justify those things, right? Because just notice how even in our own conversation, look at the split on why we think it's fact or opinion, right? We had big disagreement even in just our own little community, and most of us are pretty unified on where we get our source of knowledge and theology and those kinds of things. Yet, it even creeps into our own thinking in that case. Yeah. Does that make sense? Or yeah. You think, yeah, Colby. Then we'll let you go.
Interesting. All the questions we came up, as they came up, the ones I agreed with, like strongly, like swearing in school is inappropriate behavior. I wanted to say initially it was a fact, like right away, but then I think I had to think about it and look at the definition you gave me, and that made me switch it over to opinion, even though my desire was to say it's a fact.
This is a great point. You know whether it's right or wrong,
Yeah.
but you're being constrained by the definitions given to you on what you have to say. And that's something that even the teachers don't recognize. And so they'll take the Common Core and they'll teach it in their class. And then they come into my philosophy class and they go, I literally hear gasps. I've been teaching the kids wrongly. Right? And they make them sign an anti-bullying statement, and then they teach them that things like bullying actually are not wrong. It's just wild. You think that can't be, how can that be the case? That's just an opinion. But no, it's not. Bullying is actually wrong. You know, it really is wild. It seems to me. Anyway. All right, that's the heaviest we're gonna get. Tomorrow I'll talk about how Jesus actually is not only your Lord and Savior, but he's also your philosopher and king. And there's some interesting things I think you'll learn about Jesus in that process. Be blessed with your dinner and that, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Yeah.